Welcome to all the lovely fisher folk and people kind. Today is an extra special episode as it's Gender Equality Week. So we will talk about, no, I'm just kidding, we're going to talk about actual news and real things. So let's get to it. Tonight we got a great list, a lot to get to. Trump visits the UN and it is everything I wanted. Tommy Robinson goes back to court. Jordan Peterson is attempting to take someone else to court. We'll talk about his new lawsuit. We have a new Brunswick election that is quite interesting. The Liberals tried to declare a party without the seats to declare a party. We'll talk more about what that election means. And the UK party has a very interesting new flag and platform. We'll talk more about it at the end of the show. Any comments you want, we'll try and keep it up live. If you can, I don't know if there's a WhatsApp or a comment section, whatever you do, try and send your comments in. We'll try and take any questions. So, without further ado, our top story is Donald Trump at the UN. This is the good Trump that people talk about. This is where Trump really excels in his presidency. That is foreign and international affairs. Except for trade. Sometimes he just says ridiculous things about tariffs and you have to live with it. But this is why Trump is good for the world. I've been talking about Trump and Iran for a while. Trump's strongest aspect is he actually takes on brutal dictatorships in a way they need to be dealt with. The biggest one, his biggest global enemy, as it should be, is the Islamic Republic ruling Iran. So a bit about the Islamic Republic. This would be the Iranian regime. They are run by the supreme leader, or the Ayatollah. There is a shadow democracy where there's a fake election for a fake prime minister, that is Hassan Rouhani. So Rouhani is this puppet head figure of the Iranian regime, and he does most of the international negotiations. The supreme leader is just he's basically Shia ISIS. He's a dictator. So Trump slammed Iran. He has gone to the Security Council and he has absolutely decimated the Islamic Republic regime. He has called them tyrants, oppressors, terror sponsors. They are all this. The reason why it's really important to take on the Islamic Republic is they are the biggest causer of shenanigans globally that you have as a government organization. Their legitimate mandate of the Quds Force is sowing chaos and increasing terrorism. The Quds Force, that is the Iranian version of the CIA. They are an arm of the Revolutionary Guard. You know, an organization's up to no good when they're named a Revolutionary Guard. So, and fun fact, Quds does mean Jerusalem. Their goal is to, one, take over Jerusalem, two, finance pockets of Shia resistance wherever they occur. So part of the mandate of the Quds Force and the Iranian regime is to find Shias in anywhere they can in the world, fund them, send them weapons, and then use them in negotiating ploys later. This is exactly what happened in Yemen. So the Yemeni civil war, it's sort of a proxy war more than a civil war. It's been fought incredibly brutally by Saudi Arabia and their Gulf state allies. But it was started when a group of Houthi rebels decided to overthrow the government. Now the Houthis are a large ethnic minority there, but they're Shia. So what the Islamic Republic did is it funneled in tons of weapons and training and instigated a coup to basically annoy the Saudis because Yemen is right on their southern flank and can literally fire missiles at them and have been doing so. The Islamic Republic has gone on TV, their own TV, and quite openly said, where we told the Yemeni Houthis to fire at Saudi Arabia, they're firing at oil tankers in Saudi Arabia. So this is why that war's going on. They do the same thing. They are Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a proxy state of the Islamic Republic. Hezbollah has stated this. The Ayatollah has stated this. Everyone knows this. They also fund Hamas, even though Hamas is Sunni. But when it comes to hating Jews, the Islamic Republic can make some leeway. They funded terrorism in Nicaragua. The Ayama bombing in Argentina, the Jewish community center where hundreds are killed, that was another Iranian ploy. The Mykonos restaurant in Germany, where there were Kurdish leaders, that was blown up, all brought to you by the Islamic Republic. So Trump has been really hard on this regime, as he should be, because these regimes are openly working against American interests. Now you have people saying, oh, the Iran deal was meant to keep them in line. The Iran deal, it was basically an agreement. You don't try and destroy the world for 20 years, then after 20 years is up, you can build a nuke and use it wherever, and we'll help you. We'll help you. Part of the Iran deal is they gave all the frozen assets back to Iran. It's $158 billion in exchange for really nothing. And then in the deal is after the 20-year waiting period, if they do try and build the bomb, it is in the deal that the Americans would have to protect the Iranian nuclear program. That's insane. That is absolutely insane. So basically, if they build a bomb for destroying Israel, By the way, there are clocks in Iran right now with a countdown. It says destruction of Israel, and there's a ticker to when the end of the Iran deal expires. So if they build a bomb with the express purpose of destroying Israel, now they stated that on TV, but they say it in Farsi, so it just means love and peace, apparently, to the Western media. They could build a bomb. Say, here is a nuclear weapon. We want to use this on the Israeli population for the purpose of mass murder. And in the deal, the American military would have to stop the Israeli military from destroying that bomb. That is insane. It is utterly insane, and America got nothing back from it. Documents have shown that they've still tried to build the bomb. They've been still working on the bomb secretly, even after the supposed Iran deal was signed. So this is good, Trump. When Trump gets up there and says, we're going to keep American interests in line, and you're not getting foreign aid unless you are our friend. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. That is how foreign aid should work. That is one of the good things about foreign aid. I've talked about this. Foreign aid doesn't really help anyone. Just handing out money, it usually goes nowhere. It just goes to warlords or whoever is in charge. The only good things that can be about foreign aid is you have leverage to take away foreign aid. And that's what he's doing, right? If you're going to give countries billions of dollars, you have to say, if you want these billions of dollars, you can't be actively trying to undermine our interests. For years and decades, countries have been taking billions of dollars from Western nations while actively trying to undermine Western values. That can't stand. That is absurd. That is a horrible policy. So Trump went up, basically made a speech to a full UN. Justin Trudeau then got up. I can't, full disclosure, yes, it's my job to listen to this. I will not listen to Justin Trudeau speaking to the UN. That is worse than waterboarding, and I won't do that to myself. So Trudeau, you got to see the picture, it's great. He talks to an empty audience, everyone's on their phone. Trump's audience is full. The media still slams him for apparently being a laughingstock. He's the only laughingstock where everyone listens to his every word. So Trudeau's trying to play his, he wants a seat in the UN Security Council. Why do we need it? It's a joke of an organization anyway. But he wants international recognition. Now another thing happened. Trump totally snubbed Justin Trudeau. Pulled the I don't have time to meet with him. And this is exactly what we talked about. This is why people have slammed Trudeau's diplomacy. If you remember the NAFTA negotiations a month ago, about a month and a half ago, at the key point when Trump and Mexico were about to sign the U.S.-Mexico trade agreement that would become NAFTA, Canada would then have to be part of the U.S.-Mexico trade agreement, he gave Justin Trudeau a call to sort of go over things. Justin Trudeau was too busy for the call about what could be more important than the most important thing in our country? We still have no idea. So of course Trump, being the man that Donald Trump is, and we all know him to be, decided to snub Justin Trudeau at the UN. He couldn't get a meeting with Donald Trump. Do we think this is because Trump was way too busy? No, Trump just wanted to slam Justin Trudeau back. I'm not saying as he should, they should both be adults and talk to each other, but honestly, this was the inevitable result from Justin Trudeau trying to snub Donald Trump or trying to run away from him until he realized that, oh, I have to negotiate with the person who is my closest trading partner in trade? Well, who would have thought? Who would have possibly thought? So that is Trump at the UN, and that's Justin Trudeau at the UN. This is foreign politics as it should be. I can't believe that Donald Trump, of all people, who is probably the greatest working stand-up comedian, has made the best speeches at the United Nations I've ever seen, basically saying, hey, if Saudi Arabia is on the Council of Women's Rights, or heads up the council, remember, they're about to decapitate women for demanding women's rights in Saudi Arabia, and Syria is head of chemical weapons checking, why do we need to take this organization seriously? Why? Give me one good reason. Tell me one good thing the United Nations does. That is absolutely absurd. All right, so that is the biggest story in international news right now. Now, before we get to our next story, I'm going to have a word from our sponsors. So, today's sponsor is the Liberal Federal Cabinet. It is a great product that I am selling you. Do you want to be a federal cabinet minister? Well, we have the exact thing for you. So, some people love products. You buy something expensive, you get something expensive, you put it on, you feel good, or you buy something cheap, you don't feel so good. What if I could offer you a product where you could buy something absolutely expensive but get nothing in return? Welcome to the Liberal Federal Cabinet. For a low, low price of $4.5 billion, you too can be a Liberal Cabinet Minister. So all you need to do is go to www.canada.com, give $4.5 billion of probably someone else's money, and you too could get absolutely nothing. What I will do is I will send you these absolutely useless show notes for you. for the low price of $4.5 billion. But act now, order right now, and not only will you get something useless, but I'll screw up the delivery and you'll get absolutely nothing. Again, that is $4.5 billion, preferably of someone else's money, and you too could be in the Liberal federal cabinet, and everyone will love you? Who knows? Anyway, it's a great sponsor. I highly recommend it. I've been subscribing. I just gave $4.5 billion to Justin Trudeau, and I feel like an idiot. All right, moving on. Our next story comes from the United Kingdom, a country that, as they say, arrests about 9 or so, well, I can't remember the number. Their hate speech department is working overtime. Tommy Robinson is going back to court tomorrow. If you don't know about the Tommy Robinson saga, here's a bit of a recap. So Tommy Robinson, as every British media outlet will call you, the former head of the EDL, the English Defence League. If you want to know what the English Defence League is, it is a bad organization. It is a racist, hyper-nationalist party. Now, Tommy Robinson openly left the EDL because he felt the views did not represent him. According to him, he brought a black friend into a meeting. They said he can't go there, and then he left. My other favorite thing is Tommy Robinson was arrested for assault at an EDL rally. That is another thing the media brings up. What they do not tell you is he assaulted a neo-Nazi for yelling racial slurs. So, Tommy Robinson is probably best described as an anti-Islamist activist. He is not the greatest political mind in the United Kingdom. He's basically a good lad from Luton who goes around and makes street videos. Sometimes he says things that are right, sometimes he says things that are wrong, but he's spent a lot of time in prison just because. Now, his recent prison stint was over a reporting violation. And this brings up the really important thing we need to talk about, which is free speech laws, hate speech laws. When the Americans say they are the only country that has free speech, that is both right and wrong. Other countries have free speech, like Canada has the right to free expression, but America, realistically, is the only country in the world with constitutionally protected freedom of speech. It is the strongest free speech laws in the world. I believe any country should emulate the American First Amendment if it really values free speech. So, because there are not free speech laws, what the British are allowed to do is essentially put out very restrictive reporting gags. Now, reporting restrictions can be a good thing. Like in Canada, we have reporting restrictions on crimes involving minors. So it is a crime to report a minor's name who is involved in a crime. I think that is a good law. You should not be putting people's names out there. Also, reporting restrictions in cases do make sense because you don't want to sort of influence public opinion before a jury can be selected, and then the jury would be biased by any media hype. You see this in a lot of high-profile cases in the States. The easiest one would be like, let's say, Trayvon Martin. When you make a big thing about Trayvon Martin 2 months before the election and everyone in the country has an opinion, the quality of jury you're going to get is just the people who live under a rock, essentially. So there is some good, there is some bad. As I said, so it is illegal to do this in Canada, but the enforcement of these laws becomes quite suspect. The best Canadian example would be our hijab hoax girl. So if you remember the hijab hoax, a 11-year-old girl falsely claimed that an Asian man attacked her with scissors twice, tried to cut off her hijab, and said some things. It ended up being completely false. Now, before there was a statement taken by the police, she went to the school. The school called the National Council of Canadian Muslims, and they had a press conference. Now, the NCCM, that is a registered terrorist organization in the United Arab Emirates. They used to be called CARECAN, a division of CARE USA. So again, a terrorist organization in the United Arab Emirates. Sounds like a very Islamophobic country to me. So they gave a statement, put the girl on TV. That is a crime in Canada. That is an actual crime. Of course, no enforcement. Now we go to the UK. So Tommy Robinson got put in jail for making a Facebook Live video outside the courthouse, and basically he revealed, we'll say, data, talked about a case. But the data he talked about, the information he had brought up had already been in the public knowledge. The names of the accusers had been public. He, let's say, accosted them. It was a whole technically maybe broke the law. The thing is, reporting violations have been breached by the UK before. There were other reporting, on the same case, newspapers were breached for reporting violations, reporting about the story. They got fines. Tommy Robinson got hard time. So this is really what we're talking about, is ideologically enforcing the will of what seems like a government hell-bent on putting Tommy Robinson in prison or making him capitulate. That's the real problem. It's the unequal enforcement of these crimes. Did Tommy Robinson break the law? I'm not a lawyer, but technically maybe he did break a minor law in the UK. Should he be sent to prison? No, the law he broke, if we're going to be reasonable, at max should be a $500 fine. Like, that's really what he's looking at. But they turned $500 fine into what they're now trying to do is 2 years in prison. So there's been a very interesting curveball in the case. He's going back to tomorrow, and the British prosecution has added 2 more charges to Tommy Robinson's sentence. These charges would be, basically they amount to, he revealed data about the accusers. What they're trying to get him on is his claim, well, it's not a claim, it's a statistical fact, that these are basically what he called them Muslim rape gangs. Now, there is a distinct ethnic breakdown to these mass rape crimes. About 90% of the perpetrators who have been convicted in these child rape gangs have been Muslim men. Muslim men, they're about 4% of the British population. What makes it even more interesting is this is sort of the hate, like Tommy Robinson is being accused of biasing the prosecution by bringing up these facts. You can make a stretch of a case. However, the Home Secretary of the UK was on TV the other day saying exactly what Tommy Robinson said. He brought up the statistics, the ethnic statistics of these types of crimes. So how can you put Tommy Robinson in jail for reporting on these? By the way, he's not the first one to report on these facts. The Quilliam Foundation, many newspapers have reported the ethnic data. Tommy Robinson is in no way the first person to link Islam to this problem. Again, the Home Secretary, who is himself a Muslim, just brought up these facts on television in the UK the other day. And they're trying to say that this is a crime when Tommy Robinson does it. So this is the danger of not having a First Amendment style free speech protections. In Canada, the way it works in Canada is your freedom of expression is supposed to be protected if it is relevant to a political or cultural debate, or if it's factually true. So in Canada, theoretically you cannot convict someone if what they say can be factually proven as true. I'm not sure if that works the same way it works in the UK, but it doesn't look like it. I'm not an expert on UK free speech laws, but this is really the danger of not having free speech laws. And this is why the Americans are mostly correct when they say they're the only country with free speech. Now, we have free speech in the West, but to an extent. To an extent. Like, yes, only 5 people have been booked for it, but yeah, that's still setting a bad precedent. In Canada, Mike Ward, a comedian, got fined $42,000 from the Human Rights Tribunal for cracking a joke about a public figure. You know, that's absurd. You can't pick on someone for their disability. That's, you know, yes, you can. You can make jokes about people. Apparently, you cannot. So, again, here is the vast danger to not having free speech protections, is the unequal enforcement of these laws. And you might cure it. You might cure, yes, Tommy Robinson is a bigot. Put him in prison. We need to set this thing. What happens if there is, let's say, a right-wing populist party? I know the Tories are currently in charge and they're not really acting like Tories, but let's say UKIP gets really popular because people get so fed up with Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn's only out there stumping for terrorists, and UKIP and their populist gets in charge. Well, if you don't have free speech protections, what do you think is going to happen to all those Muslim preachers who say things that the right wing doesn't like? They can get Tommy Robinson right away, right? That is the problem with too much power in the government. People never realize this. The power you give to Barack Obama is the same power you give to Donald Trump. The power you give to Jeremy Corbyn is the same power you would give to Nigel Farage. Don't give power to Justin Trudeau if you wouldn't be comfortable if Stephen Harper had the same power. That is a very fundamental liberty point. All right? That's really where we're going with here. Now, I'm going to bring up a new segment here. I'm going to stick in the UK and talk about UKIP, and I'm going to bring up a new segment because the point of this segment is, we all know the left gets a bit crazy with their identity politics. Sometimes they have a good idea that is true, like racism exists. We should do something about it. But then they use identity politics, and things get absolutely crazy. Now, this happens a little bit less on the right these days, but it still does happen. So we're going to introduce a segment called A Little Too Whitey. There we go. Now, the point of this is sometimes there is facts that the right wing gets right. There are facts, and there's a real problem. And then there's a solution, but the solution gets a bit too identity politics focused, and it loses focus and becomes something even worse. So here, in our first segment, there is a new law out of the UK. So there's an actual problem in the UK with prisons and Islamic extremism. It makes sense. This is what one of the things Tommy Robinson talks about. There is a problem in the UK prisons of people being forced to convert to Islam out of fear of gang violence. Now, that's not unique to Islam. You know, non-racist people. I've heard of stories of Jewish people joining white supremacist groups in prison for protection. This isn't a unique problem to Muslims. However, the biggest threat for terrorism is in prisons. It makes a lot of sense. Converts tend to have higher rates of terrorism than naturally born Islamic people because they tend to know less about their religion, and when you go down the rabbit hole, you probably don't speak Arabic, you're probably not fluent in the Quran, and you're more susceptible to the people who convert you. Who are the people most likely to be terrorists? Those are disenfranchised men with a tendency towards violence. Where do you find disenfranchised young men with a tendency towards violence? The answer is prisons. So there is a problem that UKIP has hit here. You have an extremist problem brewing within the prisons. However, their solution is a lot worse than the problem at hand. So let's just read some of it. Now, there's been a phrase thrown around the UK of these Muslim-only prisons. And Majid Dawa said this is the first step towards Muslim concentration camps. Well, China did that first. But here's some things they're talking about. They're talking about advanced screenings from migrants from Islamic countries. I'm actually in favor of that. If you're screening migrants from Islamic countries, you should buck up and realize, hey, if Islamic terrorism is a threat, you know, we should screen from that from people from, you know, Iran or Pakistan. There should be different screening from different countries. That's just common sense. The problem is here. In their jails, they want jails exclusively for Muslims who promote extremism. Here's the problem. Or try to convert non-Islamic prisoners. That you cannot do. You cannot set the precedent that preaching Islam in itself is a form of crime, because you set that precedent, it can be used against Christians, Jews, atheists, secular, right? You give that power to UKIP, you're giving that power to Jeremy Corbyn as well, all right? You cannot have preaching Islam be a crime. And people might say, yeah, we need to do something. We need to get these people out of our prisons and away from the common folk who might be converted to this radical ideology. Well, let's just think of how this would work. I get it. If someone's promoting extremism like Ajam Chowdhury, the pro-ISIS imam who they arrested, you know, terrorists, jihadists, people with actual threats, yeah, I believe let's create a separate place for them. Let's not put them in Gen Pop. The problem is you can't have promoting Islam be in itself a violation, because this becomes the proverbial slippery slope. So let's say you talk nicely about Islam in prison, you're then thrown off into this Muslim-only jail. What happens, though, is most people do not convert to Islam, or most people who convert to Islam do not become extremists. But if you create these sort of Muslim-only prisons, these become basically jihadist college. So if you're just arresting, you know, anyone who's Muslim, right? If you arrest a seemingly devout Muslim 19-year-old for petty theft and you throw him in prison, you know, is he going to spend his entire life there? No, and what if he says good things about Islam? Do we move him to the Muslim-only jail? Right, if you put him to the Muslim-only jail, you're putting him in prison and exposing him to very hardcore radicals. You're alienating that person, basically saying you belong in this group, and then people in this group are going to teach him terrorism. Now, he becomes a risk to society. You have two options here. Let him serve out his sentence and then go back into the general population, but now he's at an even more extreme threat to you because he's gone to these hyper-jihadist jails. But then you might say, okay, now he's a threat because he's been to these hyper-jihadist jails, so he has to stay there. Well, now that you have someone in petty theft being in prison for, what, 10, 15, 20 years, life in prison for just being Muslim? Yeah, that does become a Muslim concentration camp, and that's a horrible human rights abuse. Two, it's also not sustainable in a country with democratic balance where there'll be left and right. So these Muslim-only jails, I get it. There is a problem with Islamic extremism. There is a problem with Islamic extremism and conversions in prison because, again, disaffected young men with a tendency towards violence are the biggest threat for extremism. It makes sense. But this solution makes the problem a lot worse, and you can't do that. And that's why this solution is a little too whitey. All right. Moving on. So, good Canadian boy of ours, Jordan Peterson, has been back in the news. He has supposedly launched a new lawsuit against Vox and a feminist philosopher, if there ever is a new thing, Kate Manne. So There is an article on Vox that Jordan Peterson is using as a sense for defamation. It's called Peterson, 12 Rules for Life and Feminism Philosophy. You look at it in Vox in itself. I won't read the whole article. I'll read some excerpts of it. Now, here is the criticism of Jordan Peterson levied from the left here. And he's done this twice, the 2 lawsuits. First one is he sued Wilfrid Laurier for the Lindsay Shepherd fiasco, and that one I actually back, and we'll go into why. The second suit is against sort of an American publishing company, Vox, and this feminist philosopher, Kate Manne. Now here's where things get dicey. Does he have a legal claim? I have no idea. I know in America this would not stand up. He is Canadian and suing Canadian court. The problem is he's suing Americans, so it gets a bit dicey. Now, Kate Manne is a feminist philosopher, whatever that means. And she said, and if you read the article, it's a hit piece. It's a smear job. It is the least charitable interpretation of Jordan Peterson's work you could possibly imagine. It, misquotes him. It takes him out of context. It assumes the worst. It impugns his character. Now, this is a bad idea. I do not support this lawsuit. And here's the reason why. I support the Wilfrid Laurier's lawsuit because there's a principle behind that lawsuit. Lindsay Shepherd has actual claim. Wilfrid Laurier dragged her through the mud, made her life hell, tried to exploit her, ruined her career in academia, and made her life hell for a year, turned half the country against her. She has actual claim. Jordan Peterson actually has a bit of a claim here that they did compare him to Hitler. They did then back these statements. They did impugn his reputation. But the real reason I back Jordan Peterson's lawsuit is the reason behind the lawsuit. It is a shot across the bow of sort of intellectuals or professors within the system, slandering right-wing opponents or really poisoning the debate. This is a stance I can back. There is a real problem. I went to university. I went in there as a, left-leaning, I think, person, and then I'm like, oh, no, this is crazy brainwashing. There are people there actually legitimately brainwashing you from radical perspectives. If someone says they have a sociology degree, that means less than nothing to me. So there's a good precedent here. You should take it, because these professors got off scot-free. They got a slap on the hand and then a little kiss to make it better. It's like, what you did was wrong, but there were zero consequences to the people who dragged a 22-year-old girl through a full-on communist-style inquisition. It was taped, right? They compared Jordan Peterson to Hitler or Milo Yiannopoulos, which is, again, hilarious. There is a good precedent here. You should sue Wilfrid Laurier just to send a message to other professors that they cannot be doing this. They cannot be doing this political nonsense in class, or if they are, it has to be from both sides. Like, there's a precedent behind this. The problem is, what's the precedent behind this lawsuit with Vox? Is it that people shouldn't write smear articles? Yeah, maybe, but it's another thing to sort of go after journalists sort of for opinion-based pieces presented at fact. Now I'm going to go into sort of the biggest claim. His best claim here is when they actually go at his clinical psychologist abilities. So I love how the article starts out as nonsense, like, the formerly obscure intellectual, like, name me one college professor that hasn't, like, name me 10 college professors. Like, you can't do it. So every college professor is seemingly obscure. Like, how many other Canadian professors are currently known anywhere in Sweden? Exactly. So it's the standard hit piece job. They call him a self-help guru, which I find hilarious because he is a registered clinical psychologist who wrote a book about, good tips from a clinical psychologist. Here's what they go after. Kate Manne saying, okay, honestly, okay, so he says some really eyebrow-raising, authoritarian-sounding, even cruel things in his book. Sean Illing, the Vox guy, says, give me an example. And she goes, one part in the book I found disturbing was Peterson's response in his capacity as a psychologist to a particular client. According to Peterson, the client announced, I think I've been raped. He wrote that he immediately thought that alcohol was involved, seemingly. Then it goes on in the article, it quotes Peterson to, how else to understand, I think. But that wasn't the end of the story. She added an extra detail, 5 times. The first sentence was awful enough, but the second produced something unfathomable. 5 times? What could that possibly mean? My client told me that she would go to a bar, have a few drinks, someone would start to talk with her, she would end up at his place or at her place with him. The evening would proceed to inevitably its sexual climax. The next day, she would wake up uncertain about what happened, uncertain about her motives, uncertain about his motives, uncertain about the world. Miss S, we'll call her, was vague to the point of non-existent. She was a ghost of a person. She dressed, however, like a professional. She knew how to present herself for appearances. Miss S knew nothing about herself. She knew nothing about other individuals. She knew nothing about the world. She was a movie played out of focus, and she was desperately waiting for a story about herself to make it all make sense. Then Kate Mann says, I raised an alternative explanation. Maybe she was raped 5 times, as she stated, and then she was effectively undermined or gaslit by her therapist. Now, this is where he might have claim as a personal defamation case, like going after his credibility as a psychologist. I thought this was a sort of reasonable thing. Here is the problem, though, where I don't think any of this will hold up in court, because according to the law in Ontario, where Jordan Peterson practices, where I live, this is rape. According to law in Ontario, that is an actual rape. That is a sexual assault. Now, you might be crazy. No, I don't back this, but let me just explain how the laws work for you. Let's say I am at a bar, and there's a fine young lady at the bar. And let's say this scenario happens. This is a rape in Ontario. She approaches me, says, hey there, hot stuff. I would like to buy you a drink, and then later I would like to have intercourse. Or actually, no, I think this, hi there, hot stuff, let's have a drink. She buys me a drink and her a drink. We do a shot. Then she says, oh man, I would really like to have physical intercourse with you later, where you put your genitals inside of mine. I then buy her a drink. Okay, we both take a shot. Then she goes off to another part of the bar. I don't see her, and there she takes 10 more shots out of focus of me. I didn't see them. I didn't buy them for her. Then she comes back to me and says, hey, about that sexual intercourse we wanted to have, let's go to my place and have sex, me and you, consensually. We then go back to her house. We have consensual sex that night. She then wakes up the next morning, feels like she regrets it, and didn't actually want the sex to occur. That is rape. I raped her. In Ontario, legally speaking, yes, that is a sexual assault because she didn't have the will to consent to it because she was inebriated. Now you can say, wait, she got herself inebriated. Yeah, but if I participated in inebriating her, if I had bought her that one drink, even though she bought me one first, even though she had 10 after from me, yes, according to Ontario law, that is a sexual assault. That's asinine. I understand. That is full out asinine. That is not a real sexual assault, and that is a travesty of justice. But this is why Jordan Peterson's case won't hold up, is because Ontario and Canada is a crazy place when it comes to law. It is an insane place where I don't understand how these laws come. Now, there's actually been a bit of a development here. We'll go into sort of this type of law, because there was a story circulating a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, where a judge let a man off the hook for basically claiming he was inebriated. He used his own inebriation as a defense in a sexual assault. So he sexually assaulted someone, said because he was drunk, he didn't really understand what's going on, and he wasn't criminally culpable. That's absurd. That's absolutely absurd. That's a horrible defense. The problem is, if you're one of my social media friends that is currently hate watching this, you might have remembered an argument we had about a year ago, where I said this new sexual assault law, where women can basically get inebriated and then regret sex later, is a horrible, horrible precedent. Because when you say someone isn't responsible for their actions while inebriated, that's a horrible precedent. Because you make the choice to get inebriated, then when you're inebriated by your own volition, you make choices there. It would be one thing if you were drugged with Rohypnol, the date rape drug, and then taken advantage of. That's a legitimate rape. But when you intoxicate yourself on alcohol, you're still responsible for your own decisions. And I said a year ago, this is really horrible, because when you set the precedent that intoxication is precedence for not being culpable for your actions, you're essentially setting up the defense for men who rape, saying, I was too drunk, so I couldn't be responsible. When you say women can say, I was too drunk to consent, you can then make the same argument, because the same logic, well, I was too drunk to know what I was doing, so it's not really rape. All right? Both of those are absurd, but because you had one put in, that's why you get the other. So that's why bad precedent, okay? Think of the precedent. Yes, we want to stop rape. Yes, rape is horrible. But when you make crazy, crazy laws that are endorsed by feminist philosophers who have degrees in cultural Marxism, it's probably not a good idea. It's probably going to get ugly both ways, because... So, now, I'll bring this back to the Jordan Peterson thing. I would support this lawsuit. I don't think it's good. I do think it sort of plays into his critics' speech that he's supposed to be a free speech guy, but this is harping on free speech. This does look bad for the free speech movement. if this was a lawsuit for someone who falsely accused him of sexual assault, then I'd be all for this. You know, there needs to be a precedent set that you cannot be doing this. There needs to be a high-profile person who has accused someone of sexual assault that's been proven to be false. If it's proven to be a false allegation, you know, that woman needs to be dragged into court, sued for tens of millions of dollars, and basically have her life ruined publicly, setting the precedent that you can't just lie with impunity. This would cause less women to openly lie, if it can be proven that it's a lie. Not if it's, you know, if there's a reasonable doubt and it's just either way, but if you can physically prove a lie, then there should be a countersuit. If someone did that to Jordan Peterson and he countersued, that I'd be in full support of. However, suing Vox, an American publisher, and a feminist philosopher, that's not a good precedent to set, I'll be honest. I love Jordan Peterson, but that is not a good idea. All right, staying in Canada. There's been a bit of a development in New Brunswick. So some of you might have heard the story that Liberals tried to declare a government without the seats to do so and were granted one. Yes, that happened. So in New Brunswick, there are 49 seats up for grabs. You need 25 seats for a majority. The Liberals got 21 seats and tried to declare a government. The Conservatives got 22 seats. So by Canadian law, the next premier should be Conservative. However, the Lieutenant Governor has agreed to keep the current premier, the Liberal one, as the current government. Now, if you're freaking out, don't worry, this won't last long because the New Brunswick election is actually interesting. So it's 22 seats Conservative, 21 seats Liberal. For the first time, third parties have actually made a dent in New Brunswick. The People Alliance Party got about 12.6% of the vote and formed 3 seats. The Green Party got about 11.9% of the vote. They also got 3 seats. So the People's Alliance is, of course, a more right-wing, it's sort of like, you know, what Maxime Bernier is trying to accomplish. The Green Party is trees and something. That is their platform. Feelings, basically the Care Bears. They play an episode of the Care Bears, and that is their entire platform. So if you put the Liberal and the Green Party votes together, that is 24. If you put the Conservatives and the People's Alliance Party together, that is 25. So if the Conservatives create a coalition with the People's Alliance, they would form the government. Now, if the Liberals get a government, don't worry, it won't last long because they have to make a throne speech and then the government has to vote on whether or not that's good. They will not get the votes from the Conservatives, of course, and 99% chance they will not get it from the People's Alliance. So there will be a no confidence vote if the Liberals try and form government. I don't know why the Lieutenant Governor is even going ahead with this nonsense. It makes no sense. But the real story that has national significance here is third parties and a showing from a sort of a right-wing third party, we'll call it. Now, we had the Reform Party back in the day. We used to have the Progressive Conservatives and the Reforms. And people are saying Maxime Bernier stands no chance because the Reform Party was really built off Western alienation, and can a man from Quebec sort of tap into that? And the answer is probably yeah, because if he takes a hardline approach for the energy industry, of course he can. But it's really showing to see that this is the east coast of Canada where this is coming out of. This kind of shows that there is we'll say a populist, anti-establishment movement growing all over Canada. And it's growing all over the world. You see it in, right, Sweden, their government just lost a no confidence vote. And the Sweden Democrats are getting more and more seats as they go along because they say, hey, no open borders. And people are like, yeah, that's a more reasonable immigration policy than completely open borders all the time. So this is good news, we'll say, for Maxime Bernier. Doesn't mean he can win. No, he has a 0% chance of being the next Prime Minister of Canada. But can his party make noise? It's actually showing that it might be somewhat viable if the People's Party of Canada merges with the Libertarian Party, get some seats out there. They could do some damage in some ridings. Now, the thing with the People's Alliance is they've been on the ground. They were there in the last election. They got 2% of the vote. Now they gained about 10% of that vote. So they've had boots on the ground for about 4 years and doing the groundwork in New Brunswick. So that's big. Now, if you're saying, oh, the Conservatives won a premiership in the east coast of Canada, hold up there. The New Brunswick, it has been a thing for the last like 20, 30 years. It's always been a change. Like there hasn't been a repeat re-election winner in New Brunswick. They tend to kick the government out. They tend to vote Liberal, then say screw those guys, vote Conservative, then say screw those guys and vote Liberal. That's been the track in New Brunswick. So what does that mean for Trudeau federally? Not much. It means a lot more for Maxime Bernier that these third parties from the right that sort of tap into these more populist movements actually have some backing, and it could spell trouble for Andrew Scheer in the next election. All right, so let's get to our next advertisement. Guys, again, we have a great product for you today. This show is sponsored by Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton, a fantastic product. How would you like to have a job or have everyone hate you? That is what I'm offering you. For a very, very low price, a very reasonable price, we can get everyone to hate you. Have your voice absolutely unlistenable. Have just the most entitled, self-righteous position you can, and that is Hillary Clinton. So, what you need to do, if you want to be incredibly unlikable, all you need to do is send all of your principles to Satan. Again, that's all of your principles to www.satan.com. It is a fantastic product. I've been using Hillary Clinton for 1 week now, and I think you know this show is completely terrible. It is fantastic product. I highly recommend it. It's great. You can get a pantsuit just for signing up. Again, that's all your principles to Satan.com. And again, I tell you, I do not advertise anything in the show that I don't use personally. I've been using Hillary Clinton for just 1 week now. All my friends hate me, and 2 of my acquaintances have mysteriously disappeared. Damn those snitches. So again, that's www.satan.com, and just mail all your principles. Or if you want a complimentary pantsuit, what you should do is just put all your principles on an email hard drive and have your favorite intern smash them to pieces. Again, that's all your principles on a hard drive and have an intern smash it to pieces, and you too can look like this woman. All right, that is Hillary Clinton. Highly recommend it. Okay, another story let's get to. So, the UK party, my old friend Jeremy Corbyn, a friend of Hezbollah and brothers with Hamas, listed terrorist organizations in the United Kingdom. He has been accused of anti-Semitism. Now, here are the Labour Party's priorities. Let's show a clip of the most recent Labour Party convention. Let's just take a look at what the Labour Party looks like right now in the UK.
Throughout this debate, I want you to remember those 2 babies. Small, precious, innocent. I want you to realise
of the country of Narnia, I mean Palestine. So, there you go. That is the UK Labour Party's headquarters, and you see this all the time whenever you go to a Israel and Palestine protest. There's Israeli flags along with the flags of whatever country they're currently in, and the pro-Palestinian people just waving the Palestinian flags, putting on the terrorist scarf and whatnot. So another thing that was chanted, and I have on the scroll that the UK Party promotes genocide. And what was chanted at the Labour Party was, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." Now, you might not notice that as a genocidal chant, but here's a very, very important question about the From the River to Sea. Let's look at the mandate for Palestine. So let's bring up. So notice here, that is the original mandate for Palestine. Do you see that river? That is the Jordan River right there. It's now called the Jordan River. Do you notice that current picture? That picture is actually the modern day countries of Israel and Jordan. Yes, the country of Jordan was Palestine. That is the British mandate for Palestine. Now, if you don't know what a mandate means, listen, right above, there's a French mandate for Syria, a French mandate for Lebanon, and an English mandate for Iraq. It means the British were a mandatory of the region. It's a term we don't use anymore. But what we're going to get to is, when they say from the river, that's the river in the middle there. Why is Israel considered Palestine, but Jordan isn't considered Palestine? Right? My favorite thing to do is point this out to people. Anyone who chants from the river to the sea is immediately surprised to learn that Jordan was actually part of Palestine. This is the mandate for Palestine in 1922. These boundaries were agreed upon in the 1920 San Remo Conference. Now, the San Remo Accords, there was a delegation from the English, the French, a Jewish delegation, and an Arab delegation. They agreed on the boundaries, and that became the mandate for Palestine, which was originally supposed to be the Jewish country. Then things happened. The Arabs got in a tiff, and long story short, but there was a 2-state solution agreed upon. The eastern Palestine was given to the Arabs and then became the country we now know as Jordan. All the Jews were exiled out of Jordan. It was illegal for a Jew to hold land. They were all kicked out. Again, you couldn't be Jewish and have a passport in Jordan then. Apparently that's not apartheid. It's illegal for Jews to own land in Jordan, but that doesn't count as apartheid for some reason. So here's the thing. That was the original two-state solution, OG's two-state solution, the Jordanian-Israeli split. Then in 1947, there was another two-state solution proposed, the partition plan that we've all heard of. That was agreed upon by the Jews. Immediately after it was suggested, the Arab militias within the Palestinian territories started massacring Jewish villages. There were about a couple dozen massacres of Jews within Israel. And then when Israel declared its statehood in 1948, all the Arab neighbors, so Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, Iraq, they all declared war on Israel, and they attacked. And that is what the Palestinians call the Nakba. So they want retribution for that. They want, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Which really means no more Jews in Israel. That is what it expressly means. Now, if they said, we want all of the mandate for Palestine to be reunited as Palestine, maybe they'd have a case for it not being anti-Semitic. But someone needs to ask Jeremy Corbyn and these supporters, why is Jordan allowed to exist, but Israel isn't allowed to exist? Right? If Palestine must be free and return to its original Palestinianism, then why is Jordan allowed to exist? Why can Jordan exist? And the answer is because they hate Jews. They just don't like Jews. They call it Zionism now. Zionism, by the way, it means you believe that Israel has a right to exist. There are different levels, but that's really all it means. So fun fact, if you are, hey, I'm kind of neutral, I believe in a two-state solution, that means you're actually a Zionist, technically. It doesn't really mean anything. If you want all Israel, the only people who are anti-Israel want to, that means you want the destruction of the state of Israel. You want the complete destruction of the state of Israel. That's anti-Zionism. Zionism means you don't want to destroy Israel. It's a very simple thing. So here's where the Labour Party stands. Basically waving the Palestinian flag all around, chanting from the river to the sea. And this is why people are claiming anti-Semitism. Because you can't be wearing, terrorist scarves, chanting a genocidal chant, and then call yourself a human rights activist. It's absolutely absurd. So we talked about, why isn't Jordan included in the original from the river to the sea chant? That's because they're fine with Jordan existing. Because people are very simple. I don't think they're too malicious. I think most of them are just ignorant or stupid, and they believe all these apartheid lies, and then they say, oh, okay, from the river to the sea, it's very catchy, we'll chant it, and it really means just destroy Israel. It doesn't mean peace. It means specifically the destruction of the state of Israel, Palestine. And remember, the Palestinian people were invented. One thing that kind of frustrates me is I don't like when people say the so-called Palestinian people, there are no such thing as the Palestinian people. Now, there is some truth to that. We talked about it. There were Arab Palestinians, Jewish Palestinians, Christian Palestinians. One became Jordan, one became Israel. So we're all technically Palestinians. But there is such thing as the Palestinian people. But are they an ancient people? No. The Palestinian people were invented in 1964 by an Egyptian terrorist living in Jordan, when he basically took the star of the Jordanian flag, waved it around, and the Palestinian people were born. What am I talking about? Yasser Arafat started the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. The problem is the PLO was formed in 1964, and the liberation from the occupation, again, occupation, well, didn't the occupation, the so-called occupation, start in 1967? That's when the Six Days War ended. People don't really recognize it. So what were they trying to liberate Palestine from in 1964? Jews. The whole point, as it said in their charter, was to just kill the Jews and turn it all into an Arab country. That's all what it's been about. So this is why you see massive amounts of Jews leaving the UK. This is why you see Jews go a bit nuts when you hear these anti-Zionism propagations being put forward, because they're based on abject lies. Just abject lies and nonsense. So, fun fact, yes, there was an occupation of the West Bank. So the West Bank was actually part of Jordan in 1964. Jordan occupied the West Bank. But why didn't they create a Palestinian state? Same thing for Egypt and Gaza. Gaza used to be part of Egypt until 1967. From 1948 to 1967, that was Egypt. Why no Palestinian state? That's because there was no Palestinian people until the Jews won the Six Days War. And then it wasn't even until the mid-70s, really, after the Yom Kippur War failed. That was when the Arab army surprise attacked Israel on Yom Kippur. Once that failed, then they realized, okay, new strategy is Palestinian nationalism. And the Palestinian people were born in the mid-70s, really. So there's your little recap. All right. So that is a UK party, and here's where we are. This has been a fun episode. Let's see if there's any comments on this video that we can look into. Again, hopefully you guys have enjoyed the show. If you like the show, follow my page. If you don't like the show, follow my page and just write mean things on it all the time. Anything we want to talk about. So I should talk about stories that make me angry this week and stories that make me happy. My happy story this week, the best news I saw, is if you have to see it, it is the fisher folk. There is a Liberal MP who tries to make a speech about the fishermen in the East Coast, and he says fishermen, and has to, sorry, fisher folk. This is where we are now. Again, it is Gender Equality Week, which I find to be just absolutely hilarious. And then, of course, in Gender Equality Week, no one talks about standing up to the Islamic Republic of Iran. That'd be that. All right. So, no into questions. All right. Okay. All right. So I think it's a good place to end it. The story that makes me the angriest. I think everything just made me angry this week. Everything made me solely angry. So again, big thank you to Tag TV, my homies behind the scenes doing all the tips here. And I will see you next Wednesday, 6 p.m. Hopefully we got a time slotted down. Hopefully there were no glitches. So I've been Daniel Boardman. You've been you. And I will see you next Wednesday, 6 p.m. Insert clashy slogan.